Have you ever seen someone nodding to music you couldn't hear, and wondered what world they were living in? What if I told you, that man wasn't lost in silence, but deep inside a symphony only his soul could feel? Welcome to A Symphony the Wind Remembered, a powerful story of resilience, rhythm, and a genius the world tried to ignore. Before we dive in, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more original stories that touch the heart and awaken the spirit. And as you listen, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me, what does music mean to you? Now sit back, open your heart, and let's begin. A Symphony the Wind Remembered is the story of Marlon, a deaf black man living in California who experiences music in a way most people can't comprehend, through the vibrations in the air and the rhythm of his heart. Ridiculed and misunderstood by those around him, Marlon finds solace in the park, where he sits alone, feeling the music no one else can hear. What others don't realize is that Marlon is a brilliant film composer whose work has earned international acclaim for its deep emotional resonance, created entirely through the feeling of sound. As the world slowly begins to recognize his talent, Marlon teaches those around him that music, like life, is not just what we hear but what we feel, and that sometimes the most powerful symphonies are found in the quietest places. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of providing moral lessons, motivation, inspiration, and meaningful reflection for viewers. Any resemblance to real people, events, or situations is purely coincidental. The narrative is intended to encourage self-awareness, empathy, and personal growth, and should be seen as a tool for learning rather than a representation of actual events. Viewer discretion is advised. The wind rolled softly through the trees that framed the eastern edge of Laurel Grove Park. It carried with it the faint perfume of wildflowers, the distant hum of morning traffic, and the occasional bark of a dog or squeal of a child. But for Marlon Gray, none of that reached him. Not the chirping of the birds or the murmured conversations of early joggers. Only the sensation of air brushing past his cheeks, and the steady, reliable throb of music vibrating through the wooden bench beneath him. It was a small bench, tucked near the old sycamore tree that stood like a sentinel near the path. Each morning, Marlon arrived with the same quiet routine. A thermos of black coffee, a folded blanket to cushion the splintered wood, and his compact Bluetooth speaker. With practiced calm, he would place the speaker beside him, press play, and then rest the tips of his long, weathered fingers on its surface. The music began, inaudible to anyone but him. A low hum, a measured beat, a progression of emotion carried not by pitch or timbre, but by pulse and presence. His head would nod gently. Sometimes his foot tapped. His face, lined with the marks of age and memory, often shifted in time with the music. Not smiling, not frowning, just listening, feeling, living inside each note as it trembled against his skin. To the regulars in the park, he was a fixture, a mystery, a muted oddity. A man who listened to nothing. A man who danced to silence. Children would tug at their parents, whispering, "Is he okay?" Joggers passed by and rolled their eyes. "Every day," someone muttered. "He can't even hear it." Teenagers, emboldened by boredom and smartphones, recorded short videos of Marlon and shared them with captions like "Vibe check," "Failed," or "Dude thinks he's Beethoven." Marlon never reacted. His hands stayed on the speaker. His soul stayed in the music. By noon, the sun shifted, casting long shadows that pooled like spilled ink on the walkway. Parkgoers came and went. A few would sit nearby, glancing curiously at Marlon, perhaps sensing something deeper than what mockery could grasp. An older woman once tried to speak to him. When he looked up and gave her a soft nod, she seemed startled, then embarrassed, and moved on. But Marlon's silence was not a void. It was full. He felt the rising crescendo of the strings as vibrations raced along the slats of the bench. He sensed the syncopated rhythm of distant drums like a second heartbeat. The park had become his concert hall, the speaker his orchestra, the wood beneath him a stage where only he could hear the applause. Every note he felt reminded him of a life long hidden. In the quiet moments between tracks, when the speaker went still for a breathless second, memories would rise. Echoes of sound from decades ago. The rattle of subway tracks under Oakland's cracked streets. The stutter of his mother's sewing machine. The soft, scratchy music his father played late at night on a record player that always skipped on the third track. That was before the silence took hold. Before the infection. Before the fever. Before the days turned into whispers, and the whispers turned into nothing. But Marlon had never stopped listening. He just learned to listen differently. From the nearby hill, a young man with earbuds glanced down and shook his head. "Weird old guys at it again," he texted to a friend. "Still pretending he can hear." Across from the bench, a woman taking photos of her dog caught sight of Marlon and tilted her phone ever so slightly, capturing him in the frame. "Gotta show my boyfriend this dude," she muttered. And still Marlon sat. Eyes closed now, breathing slow, shoulders gently swaying with the rhythm. The track playing now was one of his own. He knew every heartbeat of it. It had been written 3 winters ago, during a rainstorm, composed entirely from memory and sensation. No keys, no software, just vibrations tested again and again. He'd sent it off anonymously to a friend, who'd passed it along to a producer in Berlin. The piece had eventually scored a short film that won first prize in an international festival. No one ever knew who had written it. Not yet. As the sun dipped lower and painted golden light across the grass, a young woman with a camera slung over her shoulder wandered into the park. She paused when she saw him. She did not laugh. She did not mock. She simply watched. Her eyes stayed on the rise and fall of his shoulders, the movement of his fingers, the way his body seemed to flow in time with something deeper than melody. And for the first time in many years, someone watched Marlon Gray without judgment. The music faded. The speaker went quiet. Marlon opened his eyes, slow and deliberate. The wind stirred. It carried no sound, only memory. And perhaps, somewhere inside it, a symphony the wind remembered. Eva Lopez had come to the park in search of stillness. Her camera weighed heavy on her shoulder, both physically and emotionally. She had not picked it up in weeks. Not since the documentary pitch fell through. Not since her professor told her she lacked a human story. Not since she started questioning whether she had any real voice as a filmmaker. But something about this morning was different. She had wandered aimlessly, her fingers brushing against the strap of her camera, when she spotted him. The man on the bench. He sat as though planted in the earth itself, motionless and entirely alive at the same time. A speaker hummed quietly beside him, though no one else seemed to notice. His hand rested gently on the top of the speaker, fingers barely moving. And yet, the motion of his body, the faint nod of his head, the slow ripple of his shoulders, felt like music in motion. Eva did not raise her camera at first. She simply watched. The man was older, perhaps in his late 50s or early 60s, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed neatly, and skin that caught the sunlight like warm bronze. His eyes were closed, but his whole body listened. She could feel it. Somehow, in the tension of the air around him, in the deliberate rhythm of his stillness, he was inside the music. Not performing. Not pretending. Living it. A jogger passed by and snorted under his breath. There he is again. The silent DJ. Eva turned her head slowly toward the jogger, then looked back at the man on the bench. He hadn't reacted at all. He remained lost in his world, untouched by the whisper of mockery. She stepped closer and sat on a nearby bench, pulling out her small field notebook and jotting a single line. He dances in silence. For the next 3 days she returned. Each time he was there. Same bench. Same blanket. Same thermos. Same quiet ritual. Eva began sketching notes, little character studies, loose observations. She filmed short clips from a distance, capturing only moments. His hands tapping lightly. His face shifting slightly as if following the arc of a melody. The subtle way he would pause between tracks, like a conductor waiting for the final echo to vanish before lifting his baton once more. It was on the 4th morning that he opened his eyes and looked at her. She froze mid-sketch. He studied her for a moment. Not suspicious. Not unkind. Just curious. Eva gave a small wave. He responded with a simple nod. No words. Just mutual presence. She rose slowly and approached, holding her camera in front of her like an offering. "I've been watching you," she said softly. Not in a weird way. Just, you have a rhythm. And I'm a filmmaker. We're trying to be. I think there's a story here. If you're okay with it. The man tilted his head, eyeing the camera, then her face. "I'm Eva," she added quickly, pointing to herself. He smiled faintly, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notepad. With a steady hand, he scribbled something and held it out to her. "Marlon." She took it gently. "Nice to meet you, Marlon." He nodded once, then tapped the speaker beside him. His other hand gestured to his ear, and then he drew a flat line across his neck. Eva blinked. "You can't hear?" He pointed again to the speaker, then placed his palm against the bench. His eyes locked on hers. "You feel it?" she whispered. Marlon nodded. Eva exhaled, awed. Over the next week, their silent friendship unfolded. She would arrive mid-morning with her camera and sketch pad. He would set up his small speaker, and they would sit in tandem, Two artists finding comfort in the act of witnessing. Occasionally he would pass her notes, short, simple messages written in blocky handwriting. This one is mine. Composed it last winter. Do you know how to feel the bass in your ribs? That's where the soul lives. She recorded the sound of the speaker on the bench, its soft rattles and tremors, and played it back at home, trying to imagine what he felt. The texture of a violin through wood. The roll of drums in the bones. The human body becoming the ear. One morning she brought him a copy of her short film. He watched it on her tablet, his fingers gently resting on the speaker as the score played. When the credits rolled, he wrote just 2 words. "You're real." Eva beamed. It was the most sincere praise she had ever received. But then came the afternoon everything shifted. She had asked if she could film him directly. He hesitated, then nodded. She rolled her camera, catching the light as it kissed his profile. She filmed his hand moving with the music. His eyes closed, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. When the track ended, he scribbled a few words and handed the paper to her. That piece won in Berlin. The film called The Last Valley. Eva's pen fell from her hand. She knew that film. Everyone in film school knew it. The score had been haunting. It was studied for its emotional intensity, for its rhythm and silence, for the way it made you feel without saying a word. The composer was anonymous, she whispered. Marlon just looked at her and smiled. Eva could not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed with her laptop open, the screen casting a blue glow over her walls as she scrolled through every article she could find about The Last Valley. It had been a sensation when it premiered 3 years ago at the Berlin International Film Festival. The score was the centerpiece of every review. Critics called it achingly human, eerily intimate, as though the music came from beneath the skin rather than through the ears. And the composer? A mystery. The credits listed no name, only the words "by heartbeat." Some claimed it was a marketing gimmick. Others guessed it was a collective. There were rumors, of course. An exiled European prodigy. A disillusioned Hollywood dropout. Even whispers that the composer had been deaf, which critics dismissed as romantic nonsense. Eva knew now. It was not nonsense. It was Marlon Gray. She remembered how calmly he had told her. Not through grand reveal, not with ego or flair. Just a piece of paper passed gently from hand to hand. That piece won in Berlin. The next morning she returned to the park before sunrise. The air still carried the chill of dawn. Fog wrapped around the base of trees like low-hanging smoke. She clutched her camera close, her heart pounding. Marlon was already there. He sat quietly, sipping from his thermos, eyes on the path. The speaker beside him blinked with a soft blue light. When he saw her, he smiled and offered a nod. Eva sat down beside him, words fumbling behind her teeth. "I know who you are," she said. He looked at her, waiting. "I stayed up all night reading articles, reviews, everything I could find. People still talk about that score. About your music. And no one knows it was you." Marlon looked away and nodded once, slowly. He reached into his coat, pulled out his notebook and wrote. "They don't need to know. Just need to feel. But it's incredible. You're incredible. You've done what people with all their hearing, all their tools, all their training couldn't do. You made people feel something they didn't even have words for." He tapped the bench gently, the same way he tapped a piano key. "Because I listen with my skin." Eva stared at the note. The simplicity of it knocked the breath from her chest. "But why hide it?" she asked softly. "Why come here every day like no one knows you? Don't you want them to see you?" Marlon picked up his speaker and held it close. He wrote again. "They never saw me before. Why would they start now?" And then, more slowly, "Music is the only time I've ever been heard." The words sank into her like stones into water. Eva placed her hand on the bench, mimicking his posture. The track playing now was unfamiliar. A slow, pulsing arrangement. Strings that rose like dawn. A bass that trembled the wood beneath her fingertips. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she tried to listen like he did. She imagined his world, not a world of silence but of deeper sound. Of memory vibrating in bones. Of loss woven into melody. Of rhythms shaped not by tempo, but by the pulse of grief, joy, longing. She felt the music reach through the bench, up her arm into her chest. She opened her eyes and Marlon was watching her. "You write from feeling?" she said. He nodded. "I want to tell your story. Properly. Not just for my film class. For everyone." He looked uncertain. "I know," she added. "You don't want to be famous. This isn't about fame. It's about showing the world that sound isn't only heard with ears. That silence isn't empty. That music lives in places people forget to look." Marlon stared out at the park. A boy chased a pigeon across the grass. An old man fed ducks by the pond. Life in quiet motion. He took a long sip from his thermos. Finally, he reached for the notepad again. Only if you listen. Not just record. Listen. Eva smiled. I promise. He wrote once more, his hands slower this time. There's more than Berlin. More than that one film. There's a whole folder at home. Dozens of pieces. No names. Just numbers. Just sound. Her eyes widened. You've kept them hidden? They weren't ready. Or I wasn't. She sat with the weight of his words. And then something occurred to her. But your name, she whispered. By heartbeat. That's you, isn't it? He tapped his chest. All of us have one. That's where the music starts. A gust of wind passed through the park then, rattling the branches of the sycamore, sending birds fluttering into the morning air. And Eva understood. He had never been silent. The world had simply never learned how to hear him. Eva followed Marlon through the back streets of East Oakland, her camera tucked away, slung against her hip. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of gray that softened the city's harder edges. They moved without words, a rhythm between them established now through glances and gestures. He led with quiet confidence, walking like a man who had spent his life observing without needing to announce himself. They stopped in front of a modest house with flaking blue paint and an overgrown front yard. A single wind chime hung by the door, still and silent in the calm air. Marlon unlocked the front door and stepped aside to let her in. Inside, the house was dim but not cold. The walls were lined with old books, vinyl records, and faded photographs of faces frozen in time. A piano sat against the far wall, its lid closed, its surface covered in dust but still holding the weight of memory. Every room was filled with a quiet kind of presence, like the house itself was listening. He gestured for her to sit at the small kitchen table, then disappeared into a side room. When he returned, he carried a cardboard file box, worn at the corners and held together with a strip of red tape. Eva leaned forward as he opened the box. Inside were dozens of folders, each labeled only with a date and a number. No titles. No names. Just a quiet archive of someone's soul. He pulled out one and slid it across the table. Eva opened it slowly. Inside were printed musical notations, written by hand, along with waveform diagrams and sketches. Some of sound, some of emotion. Lines like waves, or bursts of ink that resembled explosions. Beneath each composition were notes written in Marlon's clean block handwriting. This one feels like falling without fear. Heartbeat slows. Memory returns. Composed after the sirens faded. She looked up at him, her throat tightening. This is a lifetime of work, she whispered. Why didn't you ever share it? He pulled out the notepad and began writing. Because I thought no one wanted to hear from someone like me. He added after a pause. A black man. With nothing but feelings to show for it. Eva shook her head slowly. You've been giving the world masterpieces. And the world mocked you on a park bench. Marlon's expression didn't change. He had long since made peace with that truth. But behind his eyes there was something else now, something Eva hadn't seen before. Readiness. He picked up a folder from the box and handed it to her. This is the first one I ever wrote after I lost my hearing. She opened it. The pages inside were trembling slightly in her hands. The piece had no title, only the number 1. But it was dense, layered with rhythm markings and sections divided into emotion-based cues. He had scrawled along the bottom, built from the echo of my last sound. Eva felt the air in her chest catch. How did you even begin? She asked. He wrote. I sat on the floor, touched the piano, waited for my body to remember what the keys used to sound like. Then I wrote from what it felt like, from the places silence couldn't reach. She pressed the folder against her chest. This needs to be heard, felt, shown. Somehow. He looked around the room. The house was filled with silent things that had never stopped singing. An old turntable. A set of conga drums. A guitar missing 2 strings. A broken metronome sitting still on the shelf like a stopped clock. And in the corner, under a pale sheet, something large. Marlon walked over and pulled the cloth away, revealing a set of old studio monitors and a vintage synthesizer rig. Dust floated up in a cloud. Eva gasped. You still have your equipment? He nodded, then gestured to the floor. And there, resting against the wall, was a bass amp. The same kind used in concert halls to let musicians feel the pulse through their bodies. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. It's all on here. My life in music. Everything from the first silence to now. She held it in her hand like it was a relic. I'll use it to tell your story, she said, voice low and reverent. We'll show people that silence doesn't mean absence. That music isn't just something you hear, it's something you live." He smiled. For the first time, it wasn't the small, distant smile of someone accustomed to being unseen. It was full, present, full. Then, without warning, Marlon walked to the synthesizer, powered it on, and placed his hand on the speaker behind it. He motioned for Eva to do the same. She knelt beside him and set her palm against the smooth black surface. He played one key. The sound pulsed through her hand, through the floor, through her chest. It was low, warm, not loud, but alive. A single note that hummed like the very first heartbeat of something being born. And just like that, the silence was filled. Not broken, not shattered, filled. Eva looked up at him, eyes wide. And Marlon nodded. It was time. Time to let the world feel what he had always known. Word traveled slowly at first. Eva spent days editing, nights revising. She sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by folders Marlon had lent her, piecing together a story that felt too sacred to rush. She didn't just want to capture his life, she wanted to translate his language of vibration, memory, and breath into something the world could feel. She titled the project Symphony the Wind Remembered. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the man who lived beneath it, the soul behind the silence. Eva used layered visuals, his hands moving across speakers, the quiet ripple of wind through the park, shadows on the piano keys. And underneath it all, she laced Marlon's music. Not altered, not glossed over. Raw and trembling with the weight of something ancient and true. Each track pulsed like a memory coming back from the dead. She submitted the short film to festivals quietly without telling him. Not for accolades, not for exposure, just for a chance to open a few ears wider. But the response was immediate. One screening turned into 3. 3 turned into 17. And soon, an email arrived from the West Coast Film and Sound Conference in Los Angeles, a prestigious event dedicated to the future of music and visual storytelling. They wanted to premiere Symphony the Wind Remembered as their keynote screening. They requested both the filmmaker and the subject to attend. Eva stared at the email, fingers trembling over the keyboard. Then she packed her bag, grabbed the flash drive, and made her way to Marlon's house. He was in the backyard this time, planting something in a cracked ceramic pot. Music was playing low from the speaker on the porch, a melody she recognized from one of his earliest folders. Slow, searching piano. Tension just beneath the surface like a question without a mark. She knelt beside him in the dirt. "I have something to tell you," she said, then passed him her phone with the open email displayed. He read it once, then again. For a moment he didn't move. Then he looked at her and something stirred in his eyes, a flicker of surprise tangled with something deeper. Fear. She could see it. The years of dismissal. The memory of mockery on that park bench. Of being pointed at, laughed at, pitted. He had lived his life in the margins not because he lacked brilliance, but because the world never turned its head far enough to see him. Eva reached into her bag and pulled out her camera. She set it gently in front of him. "I made them feel you," she said. "Not just hear you. I told them the truth." Marlon picked up his notebook and paused before writing. "What if they still laugh? What if they say it's not real? That I'm not?" She took the notebook from his hand and scribbled underneath. "Then we show them what it means to feel. And they will never forget you again." That night, for the first time, Marlon let her record him composing. Not as a subject, but as a conductor of his own storm. She filmed him standing barefoot in the center of his living room, speakers circling him like ancient guardians. He placed his hands on 2 of them, eyes closed, head tilted slightly like he was listening to the sky. Then, slowly, deliberately he played. It wasn't classical or jazz. It wasn't bound to genre. It was something else. Breath made rhythm. Memory made sound. And in the low vibration of the subwoofer, Eva felt it, grief, joy, anger, hope, rising like wind through a canyon. The following week, they boarded the train together. Marlon wore a simple black jacket, the cuffs slightly frayed from years of wear. Eva brought her laptop, folders, backup drives. But more than anything, she brought her conviction. They arrived in Los Angeles to a crowd buzzing with names and noise, a landscape of panels and red carpets, where artists vied for recognition and sound was currency. And yet, as the lights dimmed for their screening, the auditorium grew still. No flash, no whispers, just breath, just feeling. The film began, and for 17 minutes the audience forgot how to breathe. They watched Marlon on the bench, his hand on the speaker. They saw the mockery, the dismissal, the quiet resilience. They saw the house filled with dust and sound. The flash drive, the piano, his fingers moving through silence like a man tracing constellations in the dark. And they heard the music. Not background noise. Not score. A soul translated. When the lights rose, no one clapped at first. Not because it wasn't good, but because the room had changed. Then, slowly, the applause rose like thunder underwater. Distant at first, then building, rippling forward like a wave too powerful to hold back. A standing ovation. Hands trembling. Eyes full. Marlon stood beside Eva at the edge of the stage, overwhelmed by the sound of being seen. A young composer approached him backstage. No camera crew. No press badge. Just sincerity in his eyes. "I've studied film music all my life," he said. "But I've never felt anything like that. I didn't even know it was possible. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me why I started." Marlon nodded and reached out his hand. Not to shake, but to press his palm against the young man's shoulder. A connection. Not in words, but in rhythm. It was quiet again in the park. The festival had come and gone, but its echo lingered like the last note of a song that refused to fade. The film had been picked up for wider release. Interviews were requested. Panels formed around questions like, what is music without sound? And what does it mean to compose through vibration alone? Marlon declined most of them. He returned to the park. To the same bench. To the same tree that leaned slightly west. He brought the same speaker. The same thermos. The same stillness. But something was different now. The people who passed him didn't laugh anymore. They didn't whisper. They looked. Some with curiosity. Some with wonder. Others with apology in their eyes, like they had recognized his face too late. Sometimes they sat nearby. Not to talk. Not to question. Just to be close to the place where the music had first been born. Marlon welcomed it all with a gentle nod. Eva joined him some afternoons, camera off, notebook closed, just listening. She brought pastries from the corner bakery and updates from the outside world. "You've gone viral," she said one afternoon, handing him a croissant wrapped in brown paper. "A college professor in Tokyo built a lesson plan around your compositions. There's a dance troupe in Nairobi choreographing one of your pieces for their spring show. And get this, your name is being floated for a Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Sound Design Guild." He took the pastry with a quiet smile, then scribbled gently. "Achievement comes after being heard. This is the first time I've truly begun." Eva smiled. A breeze passed through the park. Leaves rustled like applause whispered by trees. Then came a voice, soft, nervous. "Excuse me." A teenage girl stood a few feet away, holding a small black keyboard under her arm. Her hair was braided tight, her shoes worn. She glanced from Eva to Marlon, then back again. "I hope this isn't weird," she said. "But I saw your story. I watched the film 6 times. I'm learning music too. But I'm not very good yet. I can't read notes very well. I just go by feeling." Marlon turned toward her, motioning for her to come closer. She hesitated, then sat down on the grass beside the bench and placed her keyboard across her knees. "I wrote something," she said. "I don't know what to call it. But when I play it, I feel like I'm saying something I don't have words for." Marlon leaned forward, elbows on knees, speaker humming gently at his side. The girl closed her eyes and played. It wasn't perfect. The notes stumbled here and there, and her hands hesitated in places. But the melody rose like breath held too long, then released. It was raw, beautiful, real. When she finished, there was no applause. Just silence. The kind of silence that lets something important settle into the soul. Marlon reached for his notebook and wrote, "That was truth. Keep chasing that feeling. The notes will follow." The girl beamed, eyes wet. She stood up, bowed slightly, then walked away with something new in her step, like music was no longer something unreachable, like it now belonged to her. Eva watched her go, then turned to Marlon. "That's what your story did," she said. "You gave people permission to feel, to believe their own rhythms are enough." He looked at her, then down at his speaker. "Music was never mine alone. I just listened deeper. The rest was always there. In the wind. In the heart. In the silence." Later that evening, as the sky turned orange and violet and the street lamps blinked awake, Marlon sat alone on the bench. His hand rested gently on the speaker, the vibration slow and steady beneath his fingers. He didn't need a crowd. Didn't need applause. Because in that moment, in the place where his story began, he could feel it again. That rhythm, that pulse, that quiet miracle that music had never abandoned him. Not when the world had gone silent. Not when they had laughed. Not even when he had nearly believed them. It had waited for him. Beneath the noise. Beneath the doubt. Beneath everything. And now the world was finally beginning to listen. It had been weeks since the film's premiere, but the changes were still rippling outward, slow and constant. Marlon continued to sit on the park bench, undisturbed by the growing crowd that occasionally gathered to watch him. Some knew his name now, some of them even understood his music, but it was never about recognition for him. It had never been. He had written in his notebook once, "The world needs to know how to listen. I've learned to feel." The days of interviews and awards had blurred into something else. Eva had kept in touch with him, of course. She was still documenting his every movement, though this time it felt less like a story unfolding and more like a mutual understanding. She had become a quiet witness to the truth that Marlon had always known, and she no longer felt the need to tell people how to listen. She was beginning to understand it for herself. One afternoon she showed up at the park with a surprise, a small old-fashioned record player, a few vinyl records balanced carefully in her arms. She set it down on the grass beside him and smiled. "Found this at an estate sale," she said. "Thought you might like it." Marlon reached out, touching the worn edges of the records, feeling their texture before he slowly picked one up. "I've never owned one of these," he wrote, his finger tracing the grooves of the album. Eva smiled. "Now you do. And I think you'll find that the sound in here isn't so different from the music you've been playing. It's just slower." He carefully set the record on the turntable and, with a subtle nod, let the needle drop. The soft crackle filled the space between them, a warm, familiar sound, but it wasn't what she had expected him to react to. Instead, he closed his eyes and placed his hand on the speaker, feeling the vibrations as the notes began to play. Eva stood by, watching him. This was it. This was the truth that couldn't be articulated with words. The music that Marlon created was not about the world hearing it in the way it had always been heard, but about the body absorbing it in a deeper, more personal way. The world had never understood him. It had laughed and then it had applauded, but the understanding had always been incomplete. Now, standing next to him, Eva realized it wasn't the world that needed to understand him. It was the world that needed to feel. And maybe, just maybe, that was why Marlon had never asked for fame. He didn't need it, because his work had always been more than that. It was a vibration, a call to the soul that didn't need to be heard with ears. She sat down beside him on the grass and let the music wash over her, the crackling warmth of the vinyl record blending with the pulse of the speaker beneath her fingertips. Marlon wrote after a long pause, "They hear it now. The right ones." Eva nodded, her heart full. "You don't need a stage. You never did." He smiled at her, then looked back at the turntable as the last notes of the record played out. And as the sun began to sink behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, it felt as though the world had finally settled into its rightful rhythm. Not a rhythm built on applause or recognition or even sound, but a rhythm woven into the fabric of life itself. The quiet moments, the pauses, the spaces between heartbeats. Marlon placed his hand on the speaker one last time, feeling the music pulse through him. It was the only stage he had ever needed. And there, on that bench, beneath the whisper of the trees, he had already composed the final movement. The world had only just begun to hear it. The end. Here are the 7 moral lessons that can be drawn from a Symphony the Wind Remembered. 1. The power of listening beyond the surface. One of the core messages of the story is the importance of listening with more than just your ears. Marlon, though deaf, experiences music in a profound way, through vibrations, feelings, and rhythms that others cannot perceive. The lesson here is that true understanding often requires more than just hearing words or sounds. It requires a deeper connection, one that is felt through the body, the heart, and the soul. We are encouraged to listen with empathy and awareness, to perceive the world in its entirety, not just through the immediate or obvious but by attuning ourselves to the subtler, deeper elements that surround us. The story teaches that sometimes what is most important can't be captured by traditional methods of understanding, such as sight or hearing. Instead, it's the subtle shifts, the emotions, the vibrations, that form the true essence of a person, a moment, or a story. By embracing this lesson, we may find ourselves more attuned to those around us and the world we live in, leading to a richer and more connected experience of life. 2. Overcoming society's expectations and judgments. Throughout Marlon's life, he faces mockery and isolation due to his disability and his unconventional way of experiencing music. People laugh at him because they don't understand his methods, and they dismiss him as insignificant. Yet, Marlon remains true to himself, continuing to create music despite societal mockery. This is a powerful lesson in resilience and individuality. It reminds us that society's judgment is not always an accurate reflection of our worth or potential. The world often expects us to conform to certain standards, to be defined by labels or abilities that are easily understood. However, true value comes from within. Marlon's ability to persist and stay true to his artistic expression, even when faced with derision, shows the strength of resilience and the importance of trusting one's inner vision. We are encouraged to reject harmful expectations and to embrace our own unique paths, regardless of how others may perceive us. It is a reminder that the world's misunderstanding is not a reason to dim our light, but rather a call to shine even brighter. 3. The importance of persistence and patience. Marlon's journey is not one of overnight success. It's a slow, steady process of creation, of honing his craft and remaining patient, even when others couldn't hear or understand the music he was creating. It's also a lesson in the importance of doing what you love even when it seems like the world is not listening. There's a temptation to give up when recognition doesn't come immediately, when others seem indifferent or dismissive. Yet Marlon's persistence and his ability to keep creating music even in the quietest of spaces ultimately lead to his breakthrough. This teaches us that the work we do, especially when it's deeply personal and meaningful, is worthwhile, even if it isn't immediately celebrated or understood. Patience is also key in this process. Things don't always come quickly, but if we remain dedicated and continue to cultivate our passions and skills, the rewards will come in their own time. The lesson here is to trust the process and stay focused on what truly matters, rather than rushing toward external validation. 4. Embracing silence as a space for growth and creation. Marlon's journey shows us that silence is not the absence of something, but a space full of potential. While the world is quick to associate silence with emptiness, Marlon uses it as a canvas for his music. He allows himself to sit in the quiet and feel the vibrations that others may miss. In his silence, he finds inspiration. This teaches us that silence is often where creativity and self-awareness are born. In a world constantly filled with noise, social media, technology, work obligations, external expectations, it can be difficult to find time to simply be still. Yet, in those moments of silence, we often discover new perspectives, insights, and the space to grow. The lesson here is that silence, far from being something to be feared or avoided, can be a nurturing environment for our thoughts, creativity, and personal development. Just as Marlon uses silence to create his music, we too can find clarity and direction by embracing quiet moments in our own lives. 5. The significance of true connection. Throughout the story, there is a recurring theme of connection, not just to sound but to other people. Marlon's relationships are built on genuine moments of understanding. When he allows others to feel his music, whether through vibrations or through his story, they are not merely passive listeners. They become participants in his journey. The story reminds us that true connection goes beyond simple communication. It is about sharing in experiences, in understanding, and in feeling together. Marlon's connection with Eva, and later with the young girl who plays her music, demonstrates how powerful it can be when we allow others to engage with us authentically. It teaches us to build relationships not on superficial levels, but by creating space for mutual empathy, trust, and shared experiences. When we allow ourselves to truly connect with others, we enrich not only their lives but our own as well. True connection is more than just words or actions. It is the unspoken bond that allows us to feel understood and supported, even in our most vulnerable moments. 6. The importance of self-worth and recognition. In the beginning, Marlon's music was overlooked and ridiculed. Yet, over time he became recognized not for his disabilities or differences, but for his talents and his emotional depth. He learns that recognition doesn't come from chasing fame or validation. It comes from staying true to one's values and allowing the world to discover what has always been there. This lesson teaches us that self-worth isn't dependent on external validation. Marlon's journey shows that true recognition comes when we are unapologetically ourselves, doing the work that feels right, regardless of whether others see it at first. When we honor our own value and continue to put effort into what matters most to us, others will eventually see our worth. In a world obsessed with external recognition, Marlon's story is a reminder that the deepest fulfillment comes from knowing and valuing oneself, rather than seeking approval from others. Recognition, when it comes, should be seen as a reflection of the authentic work we've done, not a measure of our worth. 7. Healing through art and expression. Marlon's music is not just a means of communication. It is a means of healing. It allows him to process his own experiences, transform his pain, and communicate his innermost feelings to the world. His music becomes the language through which he expresses himself and the way he connects with the world around him. This lesson teaches us that art, whether through music, painting, writing, or any other form of expression, is a powerful tool for healing. It can help us process emotions, understand our experiences, and cope with challenges in ways that words alone cannot. By engaging in creative expression, we allow ourselves to release pent-up emotions, give voice to our struggles, and find comfort in sharing our stories. Marlon's story reminds us that healing doesn't always have to be a linear process. It can happen in unexpected ways, through the quiet moments of creation and the spaces where we choose to pour our hearts. Art provides a way for us to heal not only ourselves but also others, offering them an invitation to feel and connect with our emotions, vulnerabilities, and triumphs. These 7 lessons, each drawn from different facets of the story, highlight key principles of personal growth, resilience, connection, and the transformative power of art. Through Marlon's journey, we learn that listening, patience, self-worth, and creativity are the tools that enable us to navigate a world that often overlooks the quietest, most subtle truths. Thank you so much for watching and listening to A Symphony the Wind Remembered. I hope Marlon's journey has inspired you to embrace the music in your own life, to listen beyond the surface, and to trust in the rhythm that's uniquely yours. Remember, it's not about the applause or the recognition. It's about staying true to who you are and finding beauty in the quiet moments. If you enjoyed this story, please consider exploring more videos on my channel. I have a variety of stories and lessons that I hope will continue to inspire and motivate you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep